Welcome back. To continue where I left off with monotheism, this is further evidence that the Carthaginians practiced child sacrifice. Of course, their god is Moloch, and there has always been this denial that child sacrifice was practiced. But however, this has not changed. The evidence has come in, and we now know that they were responsible for child sacrifice. Hubal and Moloch, as we've been discussing, seem to be related, may well be the same deity. The examination of the skeletal remains, the associated grave goods, and the stele in the Tophet at Carthage, and the comparisons of the burial practices suggest that the Phoenicians did indeed practice child sacrifice. Caitlin de Benedetto. This is her paper here, University of Albany, and analyzing Tophets. Did the Phoenicians practice child sacrifice? So detestable was the practice of child sacrifice in Israel that Jeremiah prophesied that the valley of Hinnom would become the valley of slaughter, Jeremiah 7:32, because there the Lord would judge and punish those who engaged in child sacrifice. And that's Claude Mariottini. Now, this is commonly used as a way to denounce the Bible or to claim that God is evil because, oh my, he killed these people. I guess these would be people who are arguing for child sacrifice and dislike the fact that God decided, hold on, this is bad. I need to send my people there to stop this practice. I've been talking to them. I've been sending them people to, tell them to stop. But they didn't, so now I'm going to send an army. I guess these people would prefer that the child sacrifices continued. Now, the Sira are the Gospels of Muhammad. These are of a political nature, shall we say. They demonstrate what he did in a military capacity. Sira originally comes from the concept of war. So these are related to the wars of the Prophet. While they are promoted generally as the biographies, they're really the Gospels, but these are the military Gospels. The example of Muhammad here is political and military. Now, Mo was consecrated to Hubal. There's just a mention here of the Quraysh had an idol by a well in the middle of the Kaaba called Hubal, and notice it's by the place of Zamzam. So there was an idol by a well in the middle of the Kaaba called Hubal. That well is the Zamzam. So this would be technically the Kaaba in Mecca as we know it today, and Hubal was the main god of the Kaaba. Abdul Muttalib denied this, but was willing to submit the matter to the sacred lot. It's like rolling the dice. This is a way of prophesying, but they would use arrows. They were then given to the priest in charge of the divinatory arrows, which were thrown beside Hubal. Hubal was an image in the middle of the Kaaba, indeed the greatest of their images. Yeah, because Allahu Akbar, right? Allah is great, Allah is the greatest. He's the biggest rock, a pagan rock idol. It is that referred to by Abu Sufyan ibn Harb at the Battle of Uhud when he cried, "Arise, Hubal, make your religion victorious." This sounds rather familiar, so this idea seems to be very, very pagan. Islam seems to be borrowing from this pagan source. Abdul Muttalib was praying to Allah. This is, don't forget, prior to Muhammad becoming a prophet, prior to him revealing about Allah. So who was Allah then? Well, Allah was Hubal. Who was Hubal? Hubal was Moloch. Then they brought near Abdullah and 10 camels. Well, Abdul Muttalib stood by Hubal praying to Allah. Fascinating. And he took them before Hubal in the middle of the Kaaba. The statue of Hubal stood by a well there. It was that well in which gifts made to the Kaaba were stored. Now beside Hubal, there were 7 arrows. So this place was a place for divination, for trying to determine the future, and clearly it was some kind of occult practice. And again, we have the Kaaba and the mention of Hubal. The main god is Hubal. So Muhammad's family were pagans. They worshipped the pagan gods. And this pagan god was called Allah, the god of the Kaaba. Abdullah was Abdul Muttalib's favorite son. That's the father of Muhammad, Abdullah. Okay, who was Allah prior to Muhammad? Well, Allah was again Hubal, the pagan god. He was the father of the apostle of Allah. Interesting. And Abdul Muttalib stood by Hubal praying to Allah. Right, stood by the statue Hubal praying to Allah. So this is the representation of that Allah on earth, was the statue. Hubal being the greatest or most revered of the idols of Quraysh in Mecca. Now, if they wanted to circumcise a boy or make marriage or bury a body or doubted someone's genealogy, they took him to Hubal. Right, so Muhammad would have been consecrated to Hubal. Abdul Muttalib took him before Hubal, this is Muhammad now, as a boy, as a young baby, in the middle of the Kaaba, where he stood and prayed to Allah, thanking him for this gift. And then he brought him out and delivered him to his mother, and he tried to find foster mothers for him. Now, why would he need to find foster mothers for him if he had a mother? That's an interesting question. Now, notice, Zayd bin Amr stayed as he was. He accepted neither Judaism nor Christianity. And these are some of the very earliest Muslims. They accepted neither Judaism nor Christianity because they rejected them as false. They wanted to find the original religion of Abraham, which they claimed was not Judaism and not Christianity. Well, biblically, before Abraham became a follower of Yahweh, he was a Sabaean, according to the Jewish scholars. The Sabaeans we've just mentioned worshipped the religion called Sabaeanism, which was a copy of the religion of the Babylonians. It was the Babylonian religion, which was the worship of the moon god Makkah. And we've got all of these pagan links to this tribe that Muhammad comes from. He abandoned the religion of his people and abstained from idols, animals that had died, blood, and things offered to idols. This is a reference to, oddly enough, the Noahide laws. So this is very interesting that they put this in here. So these are the laws of Noah, designed prior to the Ten Commandments, but 5 of these 7 Noahide laws are word for word in the Ten Commandments. So this is an early precursor to the Ten Commandments. Now, many people want to claim that the laws of Noah are evil. That means the Ten Commandments, by definition, would be 50% evil, because half of those evil laws of Noah are the Ten Commandments. Now, he forbade the killing of infant daughters, saying that he worshipped the God of Abraham. And when he says Abraham, he does not mean Yahweh. Muslims do not pray in the name of Yahweh. They do not do anything in the name of Yahweh. And that he publicly rebuked his people for their practices. Zayd, not one of you follows the religion of Abraham, but I. So, he's now going back to, as we've discussed, the original religion of Abraham. Am I to worship one Lord or 1,000? So now he's rejecting polytheism. If there are as many as you claim, I renounce Alat and Al-Uzza, both of them. I will not worship Al-Uzza and her 2 daughters. I will not worship Hubal, though he was our Lord in the days when I had little sense. So Muhammad used to worship Hubal. So now he's going to trade Hubal for another god. And these are the words of Muhammad, I believe. Now, Hubal is a 3rd century immigrant from Syria. And this man, called Amr bin Luhay, he allegedly brought back to Mecca from Al-Balqa in Syria an idol of Hubal. Other sources say he brought it back from Mesopotamia. That again would be Babylon. According to Abu Zayd and others, idolatry is not directly opposed to Tawhid. Oddly, we get constantly spoken of about shirk and idolatry and so on, but idolatry is not directly opposed to Tawhid, since no one would be stupid enough to identify the Creator with a piece of wood. They keep speaking of, we worship the cross, we worship a piece of wood. No, this is not the case. The error of the idolaters, motivated by their desire for a presence, is twofold. And the first being, they suppose that God has a form, which enables them to make an image of him. Because don't forget, their idea of Allah is purely like the monad. The monad does not come to earth at any time for any reason, because he's pure spirit and he cannot be defiled. Hence, Jesus cannot be God, because Jesus would be defiled spirit, cannot enter the earth realm, which is cursed and dirty. This again is a Gnostic belief. Origins of Hubal, Smithsonian. From the Smithsonian, the Nabateans worshipped powerful female deities and built lavish shrines in their honor. Archaeologists were stunned by the evidence for the worship of female deities in the ancient city of Petra, long before the introduction of Islam. The Nabateans worshipped 3 female deities, Alat, the goddess, Al-Uzza, the powerful one, and Manat, the goddess of fate. Dr. Glenn Corbett from the American Center for Oriental Research in Jordan said the Nabateans themselves who lived in Petra seem to have worshipped in particular the goddess Al-Uzza, who is simply termed the mightiest. It must be known that Muhammad and his wife also worshipped Al-Uzza. Now, here's the Pagan Muhammad from Arthur Jeffrey. The Quran mentions 2 prophets. It claims a prophet from infancy. Of John, we read in Quran 90, verse 13. O John, take the book with strength, and we have given him al-hukm, the prophetic office, wisdom, supposedly, as a child. Of Jesus, read in Quran 19, 29 and 30, that while an infant he said, I am a servant of Allah. He has given me the book and made me a prophet. Now, Jesus did not bring a book, but this is the Islamic claim. This is Jesus from the Gospel of the Infancy and the John in the Mandaean Gnostic teaching. Mandaeans are Gnostics, these are Gnostic Gospels, these are Gnostic versions of these people. Allah said to Muhammad, or says to Muhammad in Quran 93, 6 and 7, "Did he not find thee an orphan and give thee shelter, find thee wandering in error and guide thee?" The words Dallan and Hada in the original Arabic make it obvious that the reference is to Muhammad being found by Allah in a false religion and then guided to the true, as the older exegetes recognized. Of course, over time, Islam has changed the way it interprets things to try to make things neater, cleaner, take away anything that might be embarrassing or was embarrassing. Efforts were made later to claim it as being taken into his grandfather's home. Few details of Muhammad's domestic life with his first wife Khadija are preserved, but there is an interesting passage in the Musnad of Ahmad ibn Hanbal, which mentions their custom of evening prayer. In this tradition, a neighbor of theirs tells how he overheard Muhammad saying to his wife, "O Khadija, by Allah, I will not worship Allah, nor Al-Uzza, by Allah, I will not perform worship again." But Khadija said, "Leave Allah and leave Al-Uzza." The neighbor adds, "These were their idols which they used to worship and then go to bed." Ahmad ibn Hanbal, of course, founded the Hanbali school of fiqh, so he's one of the mujtahids mutlaq, one of the absolute scholars, the perfect scholars, who cannot make an error. He's telling us here, according to this tradition, Muhammad worshipped these pagan gods and goddesses. Finally, we may draw attention to a still more conclusive instance of Muhammad's association with the ancient pagan worship, where we are actually given the words of a confession from his own lips that in his younger days he had sacrificed a white ewe to Al-Uzza. The passage was given by Yaqut al-Hamawi in the article on Al-Uzza in his geographical dictionary. It runs as follows. Said Abu al-Mundir, it has reached us that the Prophet made mention of her Al-Uzza one day and said, "Why, I made an offering of a reddish white ewe to Al-Uzza when I was following the religion of my people." So his people were pagan worshippers. Al-Uzza is one of the three idols of the Kaaba mentioned by name in the Quran, and whose name was used by the Quraysh in their battle cry, so that she seems to have been the most important of the many deities worshipped at Mecca, if not the original goddess of Mecca. Very interesting. So there's a story here, a historical story, which Muslims work very, very hard to deny.